Second round, 38th pick. They're back on the board after they didn't move up. TreVeyon Henderson, running back, Ohio State. So they went essentially from biggest position, and not that Campbell is a bad player. I think there's an argument to be made. He was one of the best players on the draft, but on the board, but in a bubble, Genty was better, but he didn't play a premium position. So they go from position of need, premium position, to, I really think, best player available outside of Luther Burden, who we can get to, but best player available at a non-premium position. So they kind of hit both there right off the top. Look, he's going to be compared to Luther Burden for the rest of his career. I get that. I liked Luther Burden. I don't think Luther Burden was ever on their board. I think the mental makeup, the personality wasn't a fit. If you take Burden out, Henderson, to me, was the best player left.
I think that's fair. Yeah, Henderson was talked about as mainly more of a late first round type of.
So he was one of these guys. Well, he was one of these guys where he was talked about. I mean, some people had him really sneaking in, but people thought he'd be, top 40 pick. But this is a case where, because the running back class was so good, most years a player like TreVeyon Henderson goes in the first round. But most years don't have a player like Ash and Genty or a player like Amari and Hampton. So this is where you see the depth of that class. And people had talked about, well, don't take a running back on day 2 because you can get, players that you usually get on day 2, on day 3. Well, they kind of did. They took that up a step where they didn't take a first round running back, but they got a guy that a lot of years would go in the first, just because there was so much talent at the position.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion just on the value of the pick or what you specifically value in a draft pick, because I look at it as, I didn't think they needed to take a running back 38th overall in a draft that was replete with running back prospects. Yeah. We saw a lot of good running backs like Dylan Sampson from Tennessee made it to day 3. Brashard Smith was a guy I thought could be on the Patriots radar. He goes on day 3 to the Chiefs. I just thought this was a draft where they could have waited to draft a running back, and that's not a knock on TreVeyon Henderson, who's an explosive player. He's looks like he's going to be a good player, well-rounded player, good for the passing game, good for Drake May, all those things. And it's funny because you say he's the best player available, right, regardless of position. At the same time, how valuable is running back in general? Well, I feel like there's a dichotomy there, maybe two different things.
Here's the question. Did they draft TreVeyon Henderson because they wanted a running back? They wanted to draft a running back and said, we want to draft a running back high. We want to get an impact player. Or did they draft TreVeyon Henderson because they got to 38? Jonah Savnaio was off the board, and it sounded like they were having a debate between those two players, the offensive line from Arizona. And they said, all right, because Vrabel talked about this. Like, you want to have the board set. So when you get to draft night, pending trades, it's just very clear cut. You're not figuring a lot out, right, on that night. Did they just look at it and say, we knew we wanted a running back? TreVeyon Henderson's the best player on our board. This is what the board's telling us to do, so we're going to do it. Like, I got the vibe that it was more of the latter. Not, okay, we need to get a running back high because we want a good running back and screw value, all that. I think it was just, this is the guy we deem as the best player right now. Maybe they tried to trade up, trade down, couldn't. This is the guy that's the best player available. This is who we're taking.
I think that's fair. Yeah, and that feels like that's what happened there. And I'm glad you mentioned Jonah Savnaia, the guard, because there was talk from Elliot Wolf about how there was a player that we were interested in, but then he went right before we took TreVeyon Henderson. And so I guess that's just sort of how the board fell.
Meanwhile, everybody yelled at me for saying tackle guard off the rip was a ridiculous approach. They almost did it. So yeah, how unrealistic was it really?
And and I guess you could put guard and running back in the same category. Like, would you take a guard that high? I still put offensive line in general above running back. And even if it's a guard, if it's a really good guard, I'm okay with taking him at 38.
And he's a guy that had some tackle upside too. Could have maybe been in developmental right tackle.
He played tackle in college, didn't he? Yeah. And so, but he's a guy that's moving to guard because of length concerns.
No, actually, I think 35-inch arms, mobility.
Okay.
Like, not great at. He has the length, but after the length, like, he can't really get out and use it. So there's a mobility thing.
Okay, good to know. This is why we have you, Barth.
Would have been if he played tackle in the NFL, he would have been a right tackle. I think the plan for him here would have been he would have competed for that left guard job right away. Probably would have. I don't know that it would have been a competition. 38th pick. Probably you're starting left guard right away, and then down the road has the flexibility. Okay, Morgan Moses moves on. Maybe you work him at right tackle and find a new left guard.
Fair. I think left guard is where he would have competed. But my point here with Savnaia is that the Dolphins jumped over the Patriots by one spot to take him. And so I feel that's what happened. I think the Dolphins jumped them. They took their guy and said, okay, who's the next guy? It was Henderson. And there was probably some debate over, do we need to take a running back right here? And they said, well, he's the best guy we have on the board. Let's go best player available. They went with Henderson. I think he's got to be the lead guy going forward. I know that Ramondre Stevenson is still here. I think if they fix his fumbling problems, we know he can be a good running back. But I think Henderson, you take him that high, he's very well-rounded, and I know he's going to play a lot in the passing game.
Yeah.
Can't take a third down back in the second round. He's got to have a bigger role.
This is what's interesting because I do think they're going back to early down back, passing down back, right? I think they're going back to that with Stevenson. But as far as we've always watched it in the past, the early down back was the lead back, was the main back, and the passing down back was the spell guy. It doesn't have to be that way. One of the big concerns on TreVeyon Henderson is his first 3 years. He had some durability issues and he would kind of get banged up late in the season. That's why Ohio State went out the portal and got Quinshon Judkins to kind of take some of the load off his plate. It did wonders for him. And this is the same thing we've talked about them doing with Ramondre Stevenson. So I don't think Henderson is ever going to be a feature back. I don't think he's going to be a guy that, carries the ball 250 times a year.
No, I'm not saying that.
Right. No, I know you're not. But can
he get 20 touches a game?
Right.
Between run and pass.
The beauty of what he does is, if you remember the 2018 season, and obviously they won the Super Bowl, so this is kind of irrelevant. But the take leading up to them winning about the running backs was they were getting too predictable because when Sony Michel was on the field, they were running the ball, I think 60-something% of the time. And when James White was on the field, they were passing the ball 60-something% of the time, whatever it was.
Predictability. Yeah.
Right. So Henderson is a much better. I don't know what that beeping is. I don't know if people can hear that.
Yeah, it sounds like the computer's freezing. Like when the computer's frozen and you try to hit something on the keyboard, it starts beeping at you.
Well, we're still going. So
I think that's what's happening back there with Kyle. I think people are going to think we're insane because I don't know if anyone can hear that.
All right, we'll power through then. We'll power through for now. If we lose stream, we lose stream.
Fans, we both have severe ADHD. We have trouble focusing, so we'll power through this the best we can.
So back to the point, TreVeyon Henderson is a much better runner.
It feels like every point we make, he hits the button. No, bad point.
Whatever. I think it stopped, so we're good.
All right, let's do this.
TreVeyon Henderson, to go back to the point, TreVeyon Henderson is a much better traditional runner than most of the players the Patriots have had in that passing down back role. Deep back, not running out of shotgun, a guy who can run between the tackles. He's much better in that role. So you're not going to have that predictability. So I think I don't know that he'll be on the field more. I mean, I think he'll be on the field more, but James White still had a 40-something% usage role. It's still relatively high. I don't know that the usage increases. I just think you become more multiple in what you do when he's on the field.
Sure.
Right. So in the past, James White's in the huddle. All right, they're going to come out in shotgun, 4 wide, 5 wide. They're going to throw. Now, all right, TreVeyon Henderson's in the huddle and it's 11 personnel or whatever. But okay, now maybe he's coming out and Drake May's under center and they're going to run power through the A gap or something like that. So he's going to allow them to be more multiple when that player's on the field, which I think is the biggest boost in what he gives you.
Sure. I think Stevenson can be there between the tackles guy for the most part. And yeah, that's where I might worry that they might become predictable in terms of based on whoever's on the field, this is the type of play they're going to run as opposed to whether they're running or passing. So that's what I want to watch for with Henderson. Maybe Josh McDaniels watching more of these college offenses has sort of, figured out how to be less predictable with his play calling and his personnel and things like that. I'll tell you what I do like about Henderson, Barth, from what I've watched. He led the Big Ten in yards per carry. So it's not like he only plays on passing. He can only make plays in the passing.
We should have mentioned that early. Home run threat.
Yeah.
Home run threat, breakaway speed, really good vision. So Stevenson now is your grounded out body blow, wear the defense down. And now here comes Henderson. And Stevenson can rip off big runs, but he doesn't do it as regularly as you're looking for.
Sure.
Now you have a real home run threat in the running and pass game in Henderson.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is what I like about him. The guy that I would compare him to, I mean, maybe it's not a perfect comparison. I don't need you to pick it apart right now, Barth, is Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell, a little bit bigger, but just the way he sees the field.
Yeah, the field vision's a good comp.
The way he sees the field, the way he can bounce around blockers and get the right angles around blockers, I think is really impressive from what I've seen.
All right, let's just reset on Kyle Williams here for people watching live.
I'm gonna hear this again. God,
I'll say they were one of the worst yards after the catch teams in the league. Kyle Williams is really good after the catch. I know. Sorry for the technical difficulty there. Kyle Williams is one of the best yards after catch players in the league. They've needed a player like this. They haven't, and I'm nervous saying that about a Patriots receiver. I really am, but he's not the big jump ball guy. He's not the power slot. He ran a 4.4 flat. His separation, like there's separation there on tape. I think he's going to learn a lot from Stephon Diggs. There's real potential here. I'm nervous saying that about a Patriots wide receiver draft pick, but that's the reality. There are some concerns. Not to say it doesn't come without concerns. Again, 1 year of significant production against a weaker schedule. There's also some issues with drops. I don't think they're as bad as people are making them out to be, but that is there. But I like the pick. He can play all three receiver spots. They might have an X here. I like it.
Well, I'm less high on the pick than you, Barth, because you mentioned a lot of the things in your first take. People were apparently hearing Celtics talk. You touched on a little bit there, too. Look, yards after the catch is great. Making plays after the catch is great. He's got to catch the ball. And I know you said it's a little overblown. He's not a guy that drops the ball every time or he doesn't know how to catch the ball. But if you have focus drops, if you're getting open deep down the field for what could be like a 50-yard touchdown and you drop the ball, like that's going to be disappointing to me. But what I do like about the pick, Barth, you also touched on it. He can separate. He's got explosiveness. He explodes off the line. He's got good footwork off the line. He can beat man. He can beat press man. We're beeping again. I wonder if people are hearing the Celtics talk again.
I don't know.
Spectacular things.
We'll just pat Kyle. Don't worry about it. We'll just power through it at this
point.
Things
are working great.
I don't think
people
can hear it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how this thing sounds in post production. But yeah, like I was done with the jump ball guys, the guys that can't get open, and so this is sort of the opposite. Kyle Williams is a guy that can get open. That to me makes him a fit for Drake May. That he can either take a short catch and turn it into a big play potentially, or he could beat a guy off the line of scrimmage and get open down the field. And so that sort of makes him a fit for what Drake May is going to want to do in the passing game. I'm going to be interested to see how Josh McDaniels uses him. I wonder if there's going to be a lot of, slants and hitches and things like that he can then take and hopefully take to the house with his footwork and his explosiveness. So I like that he is at least explosive and he's a separator. That's a good step forward compared to what they've drafted in recent years. And I know last week, I might have flippantly referred to him as Tyquan Thornton 2.0. That's an exaggeration. That was a hot take. Tyquan Thornton had trouble getting separation despite his speed, and Tyquan Thornton I thought was way overdrafted when they took him 3 years ago. I wouldn't call Kyle Williams a huge overdraft.
No, this is about where he should have gone. If anything, he might have fallen a little bit.
Third round was about right for Kyle Williams. So I don't see it as like a gross overdraft. They took a gunner in the third round. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that I think catching the ball is pretty damn important. And if you can't catch the ball, what you do after the catch is meaningless if you don't actually catch the thing. So I'm a little less high on this pick than you are, but I'm fine with them addressing receiver, and Drake May should be happy because this is a guy with big play potential. I don't know that he has number one wide receiver upside. That's why you put me in the camp of I would have taken Luther Burden at that spot, because I think Luther Burden has legitimate number one receiver potential, and I don't really put Kyle Williams in that category. But third round, I mean, what do you really expect? So I'm not as high on the pick as you, Barth, but I don't think he's going to be a disaster. I think he can at least play in the league a little bit. He'll get open and he'll make some plays.
One more for day two. That was center Jared Wilson after the Patriots traded back twice. Another one, a guy that we were high on. We both had him on our mock drafts, by the way.
I had him in my combine analysis.
You had him in the mock draft too, right? Or no?
I'm not sure I had him in a mock draft. I think my mock drafts only had Drew Kendall from BC for a center pick.
Okay.
But yeah,
but I think you had 3 mock draft hits. I had 3 mock draft hits, so we both beat the big board, which is important.
That's good.
But Wilson, consensus top center in the draft. The reason he went as late as he did, 1, it's just center. They generally go later. 2, it was a tough year for him because this draft had so many experienced offensive linemen, 2, 3, 4-year starters, and he only started 1 year at Georgia, and he didn't really play a ton before that. So much more of a projection, but a guy that showed really high football IQ, great athlete, absolutely killed it at the combine, a guy that should be their starting center at some point. Is it going to be week 1? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see what Garrett Bradbury looks like in camp. Would it surprise me if Jared Wilson wins the job at some point during the season? No. And I think certainly by next year, he should be ready to go. So I talk about, there's day 1 starters, there's year 1 starters. Is Jared Wilson a day 1 starter? I don't know. At 95, you get a year 1 starter at a position where you have a little bit of runway to work with and you have a guy who can at least be serviceable until he's ready. that works for me. They just got to get him. Like, a lot of his issues are, hands, hand placement, footwork, things like that. These are just technical things that they can clean up. It's just, he looks like a guy that hasn't played a lot of football because he hasn't played a lot of football. He's going to play more football. Preseason will be important for him. And I think they can get him going and get him, because he has all the tools, all the uncoachables that you want in a starting center in the NFL.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned the day one starter versus year one starter thing, because I see Jared Wilson as a year one starter. I think he's going to start at some point in 2025. Garrett Bradbury is just a veteran stopgap. I didn't see him starting throughout the season, especially after they drafted Jared Wilson. I think now that they took Wilson, I think Wilson is their guy. He is the best center prospect in the draft, the most athletic center prospect in the draft, period. So that I love that pick. And I love that they traded down, and that this is where they accumulated the extra pick for next year, right?
Was it that one of those trades? Yeah.
Well, one of those trades that ended up with Jared Wilson.
Future fourth.
They
actually got from the Chiefs. They got the pick that the Bears traded for Joe Tooney.
So that's good. That could, that's going to be a high pick. That's going to be around 100. It could be
fourth.
Right? Yeah, fourth round. Early fourth
from the Bears. Yeah, it could be. How good do you think the Bears are going to be?
I think they suck still.
Oh, well then, it's not going to be top 100, but probably was it there? They went 102 through the first 3 rounds, so call it somewhere probably teens at the latest.
Yeah.
100 teens.
Between 100 and 120, I think, is where that pick is.
Okay, and there you go. That's a good asset.
That's a good asset to just accumulate.
And they have, I think, 2.6 and 2.7. So you package that with one of those picks, and boom, you're back in the top 100.
So they're turning the Matthew Judon trade into multiple picks, which I love. I just love that whole sequence of trades that they made. And I like Jared Wilson as a prospect. He was, like I said, he was the best center in the draft. And I think that's going to come to fruition. Who knows how good he's going to be, how high his ceiling is. The thing about that I find interesting about this pick, Barth, is that Wilson isn't really viewed as a fit for like a power-based scheme or how he can handle power. And so is Josh McDaniels' offense going to look different from what we were expecting? He usually runs a gap power type of run game. So are we going to see a bit of a different offense from Josh McDaniels, as evidenced by the Jared Wilson pick?
That might be part of it, but the rest of the linemen they've brought in are power linemen.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's more a case of, in McDaniel's scheme, center's got to be smart, got to be able to communicate, and he has sacrificed size at that position. David Andrews viewed as undersized, right? And now he's a very powerful and strong guy for his size. He's viewed as undersized, and obviously that turned out okay. Undersized center from Georgia. Box checked. So
there you go. History repeats itself.
I don't worry about his power. Is he like some big mauler? No. I think when you have Mike Onwenu on one side, and we'll see what they end up doing at left guard, but if you put a guy like City So over there, you can sacrifice a little bit of power to get some of those other things you'd want at the center position. So I don't think it's indicative of them changing the offense. I think it's more of a case of them valuing certain traits Wilson had and emphasizing those more. And also, I think it tells us that they're maybe not done at left guard. And because none of that, City So is the best power player they have right there. Layton Robinson's not exactly a finesse player either, but like if they had gotten like Savanaia and you have him and Onwenu bookending Wilson, you're not worried at all about that, because those two guys are just brutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it tells us that maybe that they're not done at left guard. But I don't think, with the Will Campbell pick, guys they brought in like Morgan Moses and things like that, I would be surprised if they changed the whole offense on the 3rd round center.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. But that's more of like a long-term consideration.
Yeah. No, I think it's more just about, okay, and there weren't really any power centers in this draft. Like, that's just kind of what this class was.
Yeah.
They were all sort of these athletic, high IQ. We talked about guys like Drew Kendall, Jake Majors exactly was another one. So I think this is just, all right, well, this is what this class is. He's maybe not as powerful as we want, but he does some other things that we know they value at that position. Kind of like we talked about with Will Campbell. You can't draft the players that aren't there. Their ideal center wasn't on the board. They took a guy that I think is still going to be a good fit.